Welcome, everybody. Hello, this is Tougher, and we'll be talking about utilitarianism today and green skinned babies. Okay, let's begin. Today is the 9th of February, 2015. Recording here in Mason, Ohio on a Monday. Alright, what are we going to do? We want to locate this theory in a broader context of our other theories. We're going to look at two influential utilitarians, Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. And we will look at act utilitarianism, arguments for it, and then 11 arguments against it. Then we'll look at arguments for rule utilitarianism. Then we'll look at critiques of rule utilitarianism, namely the objection from green-skinned babies. And we will have cases for you to do. Well, actually not, since this is online. Pojman's book, How Should We Live? Many of you are reading that. If you're not, I apologize. But those of you with that text, yeah, it's a great chapter. He gives great examples of utilitarianism. He very clearly sets out the critiques of utilitarianism, and then he gives utilitarian responses to those critiques. So what I want you to do is know all that stuff. General, the theories, arguments for utilitarianism in general, arguments against, and then your own view. To what degree do you think this theory is plausible? All right. If you're confused, that's fine. Post on the discussion board and hash it out. The more specific your question, the better. So, hey, guys, on page 99, Pojman says blah, blah, blah. What does this mean? This, or this? That's a much more specific question than, I don't understand any of this. Help. That's not a helpful question. Give us a section of the text we can look at and work on with you. We're all in this together, trying to figure this stuff out. All right. Yeah, I just said that. Make sure you read that chapter. Excuse me. All right, remember now, I guess theories of moral realism or objectivism. You remember these are just opposed to relativism and nihilism, or nihilism. Okay? So, let's assume moral nihilism is false, and we're assuming that relativism, both forms, is false. And now if we found at least one thing in history, one event in history that was either right or wrong, hopefully we can find more than one case in history of good or evil, and then we can try to find the theory that best explains these moral facts. And what we're looking at now are consequentialist theories. Alright, if you're a consequentialist, what do you worry about? That's right, consequences. Everybody say that. I'm kidding. Two types of consequences most people care about. Ethical egoism. So we explored that last week. If your theory is, you're mostly worried about consequences for you, you're an egoist. Utilitarians are also consequentialists, and then these stand in contrast to virtue theory and deontological duty or rule-based theories. I forgot why I put the interview on here. and divine command theory. Okay, a telos, that's the Greek word for goal or end. So if something is teleological, it is goal-directed. So in philosophy of religion, we talk about the teleological arguments for God's existence. This is a family of arguments that are from design. So we saw those in Plato and Aristotle and so on. All right. So different ethical theories focus on different aspects of a moral action: motive, act, consequences. So teleological theories are goal-directed theories, and they focus on the consequences of moral actions. The act itself is not important. So this is why a popular way to say this is the ends, the goals, justify the means. The ends justify the means are the act, and so they're less important than the ends, the goals, the consequences. Alright, utilitarianism in history, you see this. There's a constant tension in film and media in our own lives between people who are following the rules, kind of deontological ethics, who are rule-based ethics, and then consequentialist ethics, where it's the ends justify the means. You see this all the time. Caiaphas, the high priest, in the gospel says, hey, if one dies for all of us, that's a good thing. That's utilitarian reasoning. Sophocles' Antigone, King Creon, Epicurus, the Stoic philosopher, Francis Hutcheson, David Hume, or David the skeptic, Adam Smith, Jeremy Bentham, and John Stuart Mill, and we're going to focus on these latter two guys. Alright, so we see consequentialism all the time on television and in the media. And this last year is very interesting. So many people, Supreme Court and Republican Party, accused President Obama of overstepping his authority, constitutional authority. So our government is based, our constitutional government is a deontological system. So we have rules, we have separation of powers to constrain human sin. We don't want any branch getting too powerful, and we want to control each other. Hold each other accountable. So if one branch is overstepping the bounds, then you often hear this utilitarian reasoning. Hey, this is a good consequence, so therefore we should do this. So listen to President Obama. President Obama has used all of our ethical theories, and every time you hear him speak, you're going to hear different theories. This is, all of us do the same thing, so that's not a bad thing. But, so, think about it. This is not spelled correctly. Alright. Does that make sense? So, we'll get into this in other elements as well. So, judicial activism, that's where the courts make law. They invent law. And so, the 14th Amendment is notorious for this. So, equal protection clause. Oh, wow. If you want something done, then you just shove it and say, oh, it's equal protection. Privacy rights. Abortion rights, gay marriage rights. These are some hot topics today. Oh, yes, we can just shove them in this equal protection. Well, maybe abortion should be legal. Maybe gay marriage should be legal. But wait a minute. Shouldn't we follow this deontological process of our Constitution, where we pass laws and we just don't pass it because it's a good idea? So, with abortion, this is very clear. So there's a lot of problems with the 1973 decisions, Roe v. Wade, Doe v. Bolton, and so legal scholars and philosophers are like, whoa, this was out of control. But a lot of what I heard on TV were these utilitarian arguments. It doesn't matter if it was passed in a bad way. The ends justifies the means. But personally, I disagree. I think we should follow the Constitution, follow the rules. And so we're all constrained. We're all not using this utilitarian reasoning just to get what we want done. All right, that was way too long. Let's talk about these guys. All right, let's read these together. The two principles of utilitarianism, Pojman points this out clearly in the text. Number one, the consequentialist or the teleological principle, quote, rightness or wrongness of an act is determined by the goodness or badness of the results that flow from it, end quote. There's the other principle, the utility, the hedonic principle. Quote, the only thing that is good in itself, in other words, inherently good, is some specific type of state, for instance, pleasure, happiness, or welfare. All right? So the principle of utility and the greatest happiness principle. Principle of utility, quote, the morally best or better alternative is that which produces the greatest or greater net utility, where utility is defined in terms of happiness or pleasure. Greatest happiness principle. We ought to do that which produces the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number of people. So learn these things, practice them on your friends and family. And, all right, this is gross, but this is true. All right. I didn't put a picture of his mummified head. You can still see that over there. I forget where he is. Oxford, Cambridge, something. All right. So 18th, 19th century fellow. Jeremy Bentham. So Bentham's utilitarianism, maximize pleasure and minimize suffering. That's going to be the guiding feature of his theory, utilitarianism. Now there's a very common sense appeal to this. So in our guts, we think that morality really is about limiting suffering and promoting benevolence or promoting the good. What do you guys think? In general, oh yes, the morally correct action is that which ameliorates suffering and promotes benevolence, in that fancy language. All right. Also, there's a scientific appeal to Enlightenment thinkers. So we can make objective, quantitative measurements and plug them into the hedonic calculus, impartial and objective, so no discrimination is possible. All right. So when Congress and the president, they're trying to make a budget, as President Obama submitted a budget last week, he's trying to think what policies would promote or give us the most amount of goodness and the least amount of pain. All right, so we want to ease suffering of people in this country, and we want to promote the good. And so a budget, the kind of budget that you make as a president or Congress, there's ethical decisions behind all those things. So your decisions are going to have an impact. All right, so that's a common sense appeal. That's when you make a budget. Even a family, when you make a budget. All right, how do we please the greatest everybody in this family when we go to the grocery store? All right, how do we spend this $100 to promote happiness and limit suffering in the household? And there's a scientific appeal. We can kind of calculate it. All right, you stick somebody with a pin, you see how much pain tolerance they have and how loud they scream. All right, you can do this with a dog. You can stick a dog with a pin and see how much it yelps. Then you can pet a dog and see how happy he is. So you can kind of gauge happiness and pain. All right? That's why it's kind of quantitatively measurable. All right? Pain and happiness or pleasure. Bentham said this, quote, by the principle of utility is meant that principle which approves of every action whatsoever, according to the tendency which it appears to have to augment or diminish the happiness of the party whose interest is in question. Or, what is the same thing in other words, to promote or to oppose that happiness? I say of every action whatsoever, and therefore not only of every action of a private individual, but of every measure of government. That's from 1789 work, An Introduction to the Principles of Morals and Legislation. Alright. I don't know why I put a picture of me in Meteora in Greece when I was there in 2012, but there it is. Alright. Let's have some fun with Bentham's hedonic calculus. Hedons are units of pleasure, dolors, or units of pain. So, you know, hedonism, that's the philosophy of pursuing pleasure. Alright? Bentham said there are 7 factors to consider. The intensity, duration, certainty, propinquity, fecundity, purity, and extent. Now, on your midterm and final, if I give you a case and I want you to do a hedonic calculus for that case, you do not have to have all 7 of these memorized. Just keep them in mind, all right, so you can kind of gauge it. All right. All right. So, I'm debating, let's say right now, whether to eat this Kit Kat or give it to my 5-year-old niece. All right. Now, decision A and decision B. Decision A, keep it. Decision B, give it to my niece. I want to do this for both decision A and decision B. First off, I want to start with the bottom question, the extent. How many other people will be affected by my considered action at hand? So you want to, on your piece of paper in your calculus, write down all the people who could possibly be affected by this decision. All right? With this eating of a Kit Kat, it's just going to be me and my niece. Okay? Let's say we're on a deserted island. All right. Now, intensity. We want to ask how strong the pleasure or emotional satisfaction is. So I want to know how happy I will be eating that Kit Kat versus my niece eating that Kit Kat. Duration. How long the pleasure will last. Will it be short-lived or long-lasting? Now, I'm going to enjoy the heck out of that Kit Kat. And I like Kit Kat better than my niece does. All right? So she's going to get less pleasure than I am. And I might be thinking about that Kit Kat for a couple weeks. All right? Because I eat candy very rarely. And so if I eat a Kit Kat and then I don't have candy for a couple weeks, I might remember it. Or I might not. I might forget it. That comes in the calculation. Certainty. Ask how likely or unlikely it is that pleasure will actually result. What is the probability of the result? It is almost certain that both myself and my niece will experience pleasure. Okay? Unless a tornado comes through or a meteor falls, it hits me in the foot, or there's some other kind of distraction, I'm going to enjoy the heck out of this Kit Kat. And so is my niece. Propinquity is how soon the pleasure will occur. This isn't like a delayed gratification thing with a candy bar. This is, I enjoy it right now, this second. That's going to be very different than pursuing a workout regimen. All right. Fecundity. Ask how likely it is that the action will produce more pleasure in the future. Will the good or pain create more good or pain down the road? Now it's going to depend. If I know that I'm a chocolate addict and I eat this actually might have negative consequences down the road. I might be buying cases of Kit Kats every day. And actually this decision might be very unethical for myself to eat it. My niece, she's not a chocolate addict. She can eat this Kit Kat and she'll be fine. She won't need another Kit Kat for another month. All right, but me, I'm going to need it every day, so let's just say that that's going to be a real problem. Purity. Ask if there will be any pain accompanying the action. So sometimes some pleasurable acts are accompanied by painful elements. Is there some bad you'll have to take with the good? All right. So this will depend on the situation. We need to know the exact circumstances. Let's say that actually I have this Kit Kat and my niece doesn't see it. And so I can go around the corner and eat it, and she'll never know the difference. All right? So there's going to be no pain associated with her. I might gain a half a pound of weight, but maybe I could work out later. All right. But if that Kit Kat is right in front of us, now the decision becomes, do I fight my niece for this Kit Kat or do I let her have it? Then there might be some pain associated, and I'm going to have to balance this out. So, the pleasure I would get from eating that Kit Kat, does that outweigh the pain that my niece would have of not eating it? All right? So, intensity, duration, certainty, propinquity, fecundity, purity, extent. Remember, you don't have to all these, but those are, you want to just consider all these factors to a degree. All right, here are some examples that I would do in a classroom, but we're not going to do here. So, I would get you into groups of 3 or 4, and you'd have to... by the way, this is the place that changed my life, Harrison Hall at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. Actually, right here, this room is the 2nd floor. I remember it. That's where I had my class on Plato, political thinking, and it just changed my life and made me fall in love with philosophy. Well, really, I was angry because it made me realize I hadn't thought about much in my entire life. And so that's what drove me into philosophy. All right. I should have used the new Honda plant out there in Batesville, Indiana. All right. This is a thing that's fun to do in class, to practice doing hedonic calculation. But yeah, basically, imagine that you're engaged to get married. You go to Vegas, and then your favorite movie star of all time that you're attracted to tries to seduce you. And so you have decision A, cheat on my fiance, or decision B, remain faithful. So I'd have you work through this if you're in class, but we're not going to do it. Yeah, I'd make you choose your person. Johnny Depp, angry Christian Bale, one of the 4 guys from The Hangover, Zach Galifianakis, Scarlett Johansson, Black Widow, Jeremy Renner, Chris Evans, Evangeline Lilly, Orlando Bloom. I forgot, what's this guy's name? He's also in Guardians of the Galaxy, the bad guy. Arrow, CW show. You know what? People in my classes have asked for all these people. Somebody is in love with Christopher Walken. That was her guy. Will Ferrell, somebody. And... is that Donna Reed up top left? Wesley Snipes, the guys from Supernatural. Sean Connery. What the heck's his name? Down the bottom left. Somebody asked for LeVar Burton, Ryan Reynolds, Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie. Somebody wanted Sean Connery. Oh, I forgot to put it up here. Somebody wanted Brian Williams. That was their person. Olivia Wilde, Vin Diesel. I forget who half these people are. Yeah, I've not seen Magic Mike. Thor. And bless him, the late Paul Walker. All right. Okay, this is a helpful point. Read that bottom thing in red. It is easier. It is easier to think of hedons as dollar bills. Do not seek the treasure. Do not use a scale. Use units. Does this make sense? So you want to think of it things as dollar bills. It doesn't make any sense to have a scale. All right, it's just hard to do that. All right, now here, this is something good. On the discussion board, you're going to have to find a movie case, and you're going to have to run this hedonic calculation for an act utilitarian. So you're going to pick your movie case, and then you're going to figure out decision A and decision B, and you want to have a specific number amount, not scales. You want to have numbers you can add up. So hedons minus dolors equals what for decision A? Hedons minus dolors is what for decision B? Alright, so the morally right thing to do is the decision that yields the greatest number of hedons, or units of pleasure. In class, I really like to do the Dark Knight, the case where the two ferry boats, so you can use that on the discussion board if you want. Runaway Trolley, we did that week 1, but it's helpful also to use the same case and for the same movie case for all of your discussion boards. So you're going to use the same case for egoism, for utilitarianism, for Kantianism, for Aristotle's virtue theory, and so on. Alright, so Runaway Trolley, if you want to use that one, you can do that. You don't have to use a film. Well, let's talk about this. This will help. Alright, imagine that you are a trolley driver. You're transporting 10 passengers down a hill in San Francisco. The brakes go out and you come to a fork in the tracks. If you choose Route A, you'll run over one middle-aged track worker. If you choose Route B, you'll run over and kill 5 workers, ages 18 to 55. Using the hedonic calculus, figure out which route you should take. Tally up the hedons and dolors for each decision. Alright? Now, in this case, you are choosing the lesser of two evils. Sometimes that's what we're doing in moral decision making. There is no good option. You just have to choose the one that's the least bad option. Alright, so that's this case. Now I would modify it. With what we have here, I think it's obvious that you should run over the one person versus 5 people. Okay, since we know nothing about them. Alright. Now, scenario 2 at number 3, we modify it to flesh out some of the features of utilitarianism. So if you put famous people on this track now, it's going to change. Or if you put important people that are doing a lot of good in the world. Alright? So, if you have 5 famous people who are doing a lot of good for society versus maybe 25 no-names, then you're going to have to count all the people involved in this scenario. So people who will be upset and experience pain, emotional pain, by the loss of these individuals. So, yeah, the utilitarian will probably go with killing the 22 ordinary people on it versus all these famous people who are, let's say they're doing a lot of good and they have charity foundations and having a huge impact on the world. Alright? Scenario number 3, let's say Route A has your girlfriend or boyfriend on it, or husband, wife, and Route B has 5 strangers on it, and an ex that you hate. Now, a utilitarian, interestingly enough, does not count his or her own pleasure any greater or any less than anybody else. So, you can't have these personal vendettas, or you can't have this duty to your girlfriend or boyfriend that would supersede your duty to the maximal consequences. Alright? So, scenario number 3, you run over your girlfriend and boyfriend to save the 5 strangers and an ex you hate. Okay? I apologize, I'm rushing through this. Usually I have students in the classroom who will ask me questions of clarification, but why don't you can do that on the discussion board or email me. Alright. You guys have an ethical decision-making handout, numerous places in the course, but that might help you work through this. And you know what? We're going to help each other on discussion board. So you might... You can do this. Remember the marks of a philosopher are sharp minds and tender hearts. So you can lovingly help each other with the calculations. All right. Help each other on discussion board. 2 critiques of Bentham's view. 1. It's difficult to objectively assign values for the hedonic calculus. Secondly, a failure to distinguish between the different kinds of pleasure leads to certain problems. All right, let's look at this first critique. So objectively assigning values to things in the hedonic calculus is difficult, if not impossible. This is one critique of Bentham's hedonic calculus. And you'll see this. So in your groups, if you're trying to assign amounts of pleasure and trying to do this, it's difficult to figure out, you know, propinquity, fecundity, extent, nearness, you know, all this stuff. How do you calculate all this stuff? So for instance, how much pleasure does a 36-year-old woman accumulate after she pays off her Volkswagen? Is that 300 hedons or 467 hedons? Or how much pleasure does a man take or receive when he begins a new relationship with a woman he met online? 216 hedons or 1 million hedons? And what about the pleasure of a 9-year-old when he opens the box and finds a red Ryder BB gun? Alright. I should have a picture of Ralphie on here, not Jeremy. Okay. Alright, do you see what I mean? Like, it's, how do we calculate this? Let me respond on the behalf of Bentham. You know what? We can do it. It's good enough. We can roughly do it. Because guess what? When you go to the store to buy, to spend $100 on your family, or you're budgeting for Christmas presents, this is what you're doing. You're gauging how to buy presents for somebody to see how much pleasure they get. Alright? So, anytime you buy a present for somebody, you are doing this hedonic calculus. How much pleasure are they going to get? Is it worth the pain to my pocketbook? And so on. Alright? If you're distributing $100 amongst, you know, 4 kids in the house, how do you do that? Alright? My sister's deciding on summer camps for her kids, and she's got to budget this and see the payoff, you know, for these different camps and just figure this all out. Alright? Second critique of Bentham, that it's a pig philosophy. Since Bentham does not distinguish the kinds of pleasure, a person might derive the same amount of hedons from having a can of Pabst Blue Ribbon with his buddies as a person who listens to a live performance of Beethoven's Fifth, played by the London Symphony Orchestra. Alright, so this is why his philosophy came to be known as the pig philosophy. So, famous quote, is it better to be Socrates dissatisfied or a pig satisfied? It seems Bentham would opt for being a pig. Alright? So, this is going to be the major difference between John Stuart Mill and Jeremy Bentham. Mill is going to say, no, we can distinguish types of pleasure. Some are higher pleasures than other, and we can rank these things. Bentham says, who are you to judge, Mr. Mill? Pleasure is pleasure is pleasure is pleasure. If I derive pleasure from drinking a 60-pack of Schlitz when watching Jerry Springer in my van down by the river, so be it. You know, and you, Mr. Wine drinking, Pappy bourbon drinking, you know, opera going guy. Ooh, who are you? Hey, I get just as much pleasure as you do from your so-called refined pleasures. Who are you to judge? Mill's going to say, Bentham, no, you're wrong. There are better pleasures than others. All right. So you guys are going to have to decide. Now, Pojman gives this example of the pleasure machine in his chapter, so you have an option of answering this question for the discussion board. So why don't you guys do that on here? Basically, he says this: Imagine a virtual reality machine exists such that it would allow people hooked up to it to experience all kinds of constant pleasure for years on end. Assume that the world has the means to hook 75% of the world's population into these virtual reality capsules. Also, if we do this, the other 2 billion people will live comfortably and starvation would be eliminated, since it is easy to supply intravenous meals to the people hooked up to the machines. The moral question: should we put 4 billion people out of 7 in these virtual reality pleasure vats until they die? So do a hedonic calculation from Bentham's perspective. Have you guys seen The Matrix or The Truman Show? All right. So Pojman asks a couple other things. The lives of Susie and Izzy. And question number 1. But yeah, you can choose to do those on the discussion board if you want. All right, let's look at Mill. Excuse me. All right. So again, this is a teleological theory. Mill shared Bentham's empiricism and optimism, and he loved Bentham's utilitarian view. He just said, "Hey, we just need to advance it a little bit. Let's make it better." And Mill agreed with Bentham that pleasure is an intrinsic good. All right, but Mill furthered Bentham's view by arguing that pleasure is the only intrinsic versus instrumental good. All right. Do you guys remember the difference between intrinsic good versus instrumental goods? Intrinsic goods are goods for themselves. Instrumental goods are it's good for something else. So, for instance, the dentist is an instrumental good. Most people don't go to the dentist for fun. All right, it's a necessary evil, and the good is dental health. Okay. Dollar bills. We really don't care, unless you're a collector, you don't really care what the form of currency, hard currency it is. All right, whether it's a dollar bill or a metal coin. Money is good for what it gets you. It's not just good to have it for itself unless you're a collector. So does that make sense? Versus an inherent good like happiness or wisdom is both intrinsic and instrumental, I think. So it's just good to be wise, and also being wise is good for stuff that it gets you, So, all right. So Mill says we actually can distinguish types of pleasure, and some pleasures are qualitatively different than others. So Mill asked, as I just said, is it better to be a human dissatisfied than a pig satisfied? Is it better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied? All right. Now that's directly against Jeremy Bentham's view when, to quote Bentham, he says, "The quantity of pleasure being equal, pushpin is as good as poetry." So pushpin was just a game, like Tiddlywinks or whatever. So yes, playing Xbox and the pleasure you get from playing Xbox is just as good as reading Yeats or whatever. All right. The pleasure you get from watching a Captain America movie is just as good as reading the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey. Now, Mill's going to say no. Reading is going to be a richer pleasure than film or what have you. So you guys decide. If you've seen The Matrix, we need to ask this. Is ignorance bliss? Would you choose the blue pill or the red pill if you were Neo, or the better example is actually Cypher? If you remember The Matrix, Cypher has the best decision in the movie. He knows what it's like to be plugged in the Matrix and be deceived of reality. He also knows the crappy world of living underground, all right, and running from the machines all the time. So Cypher does actually have the best choice. He knows the consequences of each choice, so he really doesn't have a choice, red pill or blue pill. Do I want to live a life of a lie in a virtual reality world, or do I want to live this horrible life running from machines? And plus, I'm in love with Trinity, and she loves a superstar, Keanu Reeves. So life is horrible here. We just eat this porridge. I'd rather eat fake steak in virtual reality world than real porridge in the real world. Though some people would say, you know what? No, truth is more important, even though it's painful. You guys be the judge. Talk about it in the discussion board. Group work, discussion board work. Is Mill right to say it is better to be Socrates dissatisfied? Or do you think Bentham's right, it's better to be a pig satisfied? Alright, Pojman does a good job here. There you have it. So yeah, The Truman Show is a good one there. If you've seen that with Jim Carrey, it's a great question. Would you rather have a wonderful life, have a good wife, good friends, though all of it be a lie? Or would you rather live a lonely life, that type of thing? And there's Cypher eating that steak on the right side of your screen. Alright, let's look at "11 Worries that Philosophers Have Had with Utilitarianism." Here they are listed. I'm not going to read them out right now. Let's just walk through them. Alright, this is what Pojman calls the No Rest Objection. Turn to page 127 in your book and read it here. Basically, another way to phrase this is that it requires too much of individuals. Utilitarianism says that every decision should maximize pleasure and minimize pain in the world. Now, how can my choice to go see the new Enigma movie, I forget what it's called, or the new Sylvester Stallone movie, Rocky 19, how can this decision to go to a dinner and a movie be ethical when I could give that, what are movies now? They're not even $9 anymore. $13 to the Red Cross for tsunami relief or whatever. Alright? So, on Utilitarianism, every dollar spent becomes an ethical decision. Alright, I'm at the grocery store. Should I buy, what do I buy? Should I buy some generic spaghetti and generic peanut butter and give the rest of that money to a poor orphan in Zimbabwe? Or should I splurge on myself and buy myself a couple filet mignons and a nice bottle of wine, and so on? Utilitarian is going to say, whoa, 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 no, you got to give that away. So, people are not going to buy really nice houses. People are not going to buy yachts. People are not going to buy all this stuff because people are going to invest their money to provide the max amount of benefit for the most amount of people, because you are not special in Utilitarianism. You are not special. That's one thing students forget. Sometimes they'll count their own pleasure more than others. No. You are just a piece in the machine, the calculation machine. Alright? Now, go to Pojman page 127 is the response to this objection. And go there and see if this is a good response to this objection. Alright, the absurd implications objection. You can read this on page 123 of Pojman. I'm not going to fool with it. Well, basically, if you have choice A, choice B, one is a lie, one's tell the truth, and they yield the exact same conclusion, exact same amount of hedons, decision A, decision B, it doesn't matter to the utilitarian which one he does or she does. Alright? But that strikes us in the wrong way. Wait a minute. If all things being equal, and then both the decisions are the same amount of pleasure and pain, shouldn't it be better to tell the truth than lie? So that's one objection leveled at Utilitarianism. Go read the response to this objection, pages 127, 128. Alright. a lot of the responses there basically act utilitarian might suffer from this, but rule utilitarianism doesn't. All right, question 2. And also there's a hierarchy of rules, and looking at long-term rules, propinquity, fecundity. You'll be able to calculate these out. All right. This objection that act utilitarianism requires too much impartiality. Remember, for the act utilitarian, you and your friends and family do not deserve a special place in the cost-benefit analysis. Your pain and pleasure matters the same as a stranger's. Alright, so here's a case. Imagine that epilepsy surgery is the same price as knee surgery to fix a torn ACL and MCL. Now, if a random child in Kansas would derive 1,000 hedons from a surgery to help with this epilepsy, and your own son would derive 800 hedons from getting his knee fixed, which would enable him to play ball again, the ethical thing for you to do would be to pay for the stranger's son's surgery. Does that make sense? So you have decision A, you pay for your son's surgery. Decision B, pay for a stranger's surgery. And wow, how do we figure this out? Ooh, if you help this kid with epilepsy, you pay for that surgery, he's going to have more pleasure and less pain than your son. Okay? So the moral thing to do for an act utilitarian is to pay for the stranger's surgery. Problem is, wait. This doesn't seem right. It seems like we should actually be partial and take care of our own. We have certain duties as parents. But act utilitarianism, there's too much impartiality. All right. This is the distribution of happiness objection. So imagine that I need to get $100 to pay for a woman to visit her husband before he goes off to war. And let's say I have to get this money from people in the class. Now I have a choice. A, I can take $10 from every person in the room, or take $100 from one student. Now, choice A, 10 people get 5 dolors, or negative hedons, units of pain. And Act B, one person gets 50 units of pain. What should I do? Now, it doesn't matter for the act utilitarian. Why? Decision A, you get 50 hedons. Decision B, you get 50 dolors. It's the same. There's the same amount of pain in both decisions. Now, the problem is, wait a minute, in our guts, it seems more fair to spread out the pain by taking money from 10 different people instead of just taking money from one person. But the act utilitarianism doesn't seem to have a way to solve this problem. Those decisions are equal. All right? So, now act utilitarianism ignores duties. This is kind of a category. This is kind of an absurd implication objection, with specifically duties. So let's have the case of spies, Aldrich Ames and Robert Hansen. If you've seen the 2006 movie Breach, Ryan Philippe, however you say it, he's in that. I think it's a good film. But basically, these spies had the choice to sell secrets to the Soviet Union for cash and diamonds. There were 272 million people in the Soviet Union in 1985. Now there were 230 million people in the United States in 1985. If the decision to spy for the Soviets would get everyone in the USSR 1 hedon and 1 dollar, negative hedon for Americans, what would be the ethical thing to do? No brainer. You spy for the Soviet Union. Why? Act utilitarianism doesn't account for duties as American citizens not to be traitorous. Does that make sense? So, if decision A to spy would help give pleasure to millions more people, decision B then decision B, then that's what you should do. But the problem is, whoa, 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 whoa. It seems like we have duties to country and family that should be more important than maximizing happiness, maximizing pleasure and pain. All right, decision to become a porn star. Let's say you're married, but you get approached, and you may make millions of Americans happy by committing adultery on a daily basis in front of a camera. All right? In that case, being a porn star is the ethical thing to do for an act utilitarian. Because the only person that suffers is your husband or wife or maybe kids. Okay? Decision A, become a porn star. All these people are happy watching you star in these pornography movies. Decision B, who gets upset? Your wife and kids. All right? And maybe yourself. So, it seems like, whoa, 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 dude. It seems like you have a duty to your wife and kids, and it doesn't matter the consequences. So what if you becoming a porn star will bring a pleasure to a lot of people? It seems like there's some things that are more important. Your duty to be a good spouse. Make sense? All right. Too much calculating. This is Pojman's Comparative Consequences Objection, if you want to look up that on page 121, 122. I stole this poem from his book, so you can read it there as well. Barbara McKinnon actually said in her textbook I used a few years ago, quote, "We must consider how many people will be affected by alternative actions, whether they will be pleased or pained by them, how pleased or pained they will be, and for how long, and the likelihood that what we estimate will happen will in fact come to be." So she summarizes kind of the 7 elements for Bentham right there. Is it possible to know all of the little variables that could factor into the equation? Depending upon the variables, we might have hedons ranging from 100 to 10 million. All right? And so many argue that utilitarianism is only useful in hindsight when we can see what all of the unseen variables were. Nota bene, this argument helps Kant generate his deontological system, and the path to hell is paved with good intentions. All right, this poem illustrates this problem of calculating, of doing the hedonic calculus. For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the rider was lost. For want of a rider, the battle was lost. For want of a battle, the kingdom was lost, and all for the want of a horseshoe nail. So, let's say the farrier or the blacksmith's wife was looking for a hairpin. All right? And she's like, oh, there's this nail here. I can steal it from my husband's workbench and put it in my hair. Let's see. Decision A. Wow, this is not going to affect my husband very much. So I'm going to stick this nail in my hair. I'm happier than him, so I made a nice moral decision. Okay? Wrong. Let's say that nail did that. Just say that was the last nail in the kingdom. He didn't put it in the horse, and the whole kingdom is taken over just because that woman stole that nail off of her husband's workbench. That's sexist. Let's say the male had long hair and he wanted that nail, and his wife was the blacksmith, and because the wife didn't have that nail for the horse, the kingdom was lost. All right, do you get it? Okay. The next objection. All right. Another problem with act utilitarianism. It seems like some actions are inherently wrong. Remember, this was the objection we had before about lying versus telling the truth. There's just sometimes, actually, the ends does not justify the means. Sometimes some of the means are so horrendous, are actually inherently evil. At least that's what common sense intuition. So, some things, regardless of consequences, are so wrong that we shouldn't do them, is this objection. And Utilitarianism says we should do those. All right. So, for instance, rape. All right. So, if let's say some intergalactic aliens come down and they tell me to rape a squirrel. And if I do this, they will give everybody in the world $1 billion to spend. And they'll give us the cure for cancer. Now, an utilitarian should say, yes, I should do that action. But it seems like no. There are some things like rape that should always be off the table, even if it produces a lot of good in the world. Child molestation, same thing. Hey, you know what? A lot of people think that, yeah, if some sadistic person gives you a choice, molest this child or do this, you know what? It's just better for the whole ship to go down. There's some things worse than dying and that type of thing. All right? Genocide, same thing. Think about it. What acts for you are just off the table? To show this example is this, I think Pojman gives this example in his text. Let me just read it, and then you can do this question on the discussion board. Imagine a utopian society Imagine there was a utopian society that was governed by aliens from the planet Kolob. In this society, the energy supply is endless. Each individual pursues his or her hobby for a living, and everyone is rich. Nobody's sick. There's no crime, and there's no dearth of food or drink or culture. Everyone is a philosopher, and the debates are intense and fun at the local cafes. The aliens defend the borders from all world wars and terrorist attacks. But there's a price to maintain this utopia. In the basement of a Capitol building, there's a tortured 10-year-old in solitary confinement. Every day, someone has to cane the buttocks of this individual and whip her with a 12-foot bullwhip. She's allowed 1 cup of semi-nutritious swill every day. Whenever she dies, usually after 3 years, some other 10-year-old in the society has to take her place. Now, everyone in this society is an utilitarian, so the amount of pleasure had by the millions of individuals in the society outweighs the pain of the 10-year-old in the torture chamber. Everyone in this society needs to consent to the sacrifice. So, at the age of 18, you are taken to the torture chamber to witness the beating of the child. Afterwards, you're given the choice to stay in the society or go off into exile in the wilderness and scrounge for food and water and fear a horrible death by beheading by ISIS terrorists. What do? All right? You get the point. So this objection is, wait a minute, there's some things that seem so inherently wrong. The taking of a 10-year-old and torturing her for 3 years. You know what? Aliens, maybe it's better you guys just get off this planet, and we would rather have disease and poverty and stuff like that, because we're not going to do this. This is inherently wrong to torture a 10-year-old child, regardless of the consequences. All right? Now, students disagree on this. You guys have to be the judge and talk about it on the discussion board. All right. Virtual reality machine. I think this is out of place. If society could adopt a machine that would make life very convenient. Oh, discuss this. This is a DB question. If society could adopt a machine that would make life very convenient, enable humans to do millions more things than they could do otherwise, but then if these machines did not exist. But these machines would kill 30,000 to 50,000 people a year in the U.S. Would it be worth it to have these machines? do you guys think? All right. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? What machine this is? This is actually something we have actually chosen as Americans. All right. Dostoevsky. I went to his apartment, one of his apartments, when I was in St. Petersburg, Russia, with my cousin. We're going to skip this, but you might want to pause it and read this. Naturalistic fallacy, objection. Pause it and read it. Email me if you're going to talk about it. I'm going to skip it. Nietzsche's objection. He said a few things. All right. So, Nietzsche's going to use the same general critique of Kant and the utilitarians. Namely, whoa, dude. You guys are sneaking in Judeo-Christian morality and this view that human beings are inherently valuable and precious. But how does that make any kind of sense if we are just animals? All right, remember Pojman asked the question, how should we live? Why should I be moral? Those are important moral questions. And also, why should we value human beings above other things? Ourselves, other parts of nature? Is there anything special about human beings? If there is no God and everything's just matter, why should we care about human beings above other things? That's the central question in ethics, valuing human beings. I think, at least. So, Nietzsche's going to say, listen, you guys, Mr. Mill, Mr. Bentham, you guys have this moral principle that says we should value the pleasure and pain of others. Nietzsche's going to say, why in the world should we care about the pain and pleasure of others? We should care about our own pain and pleasure, but not other people. Give me one reason why I should care about that kid in Kansas who needs epilepsy surgery. Why should I care about those people who were hurt from the 2007 tsunami? Why should I care about those people hurt from that earthquake? Why should I care about the poor in my town unless it has an impact on me? All right? For Nietzsche, appropriation, stealing was a virtue, was admirable. All right. Same thing with Kant. He's going to say the same thing. Whoa, Kant. So this is kind of an atheistic objection. All right. Talk about this on the discussion board. See what you guys think. And see if it makes sense and if you agree or disagree. Again, this is similar objection here. Atheists and human value. We'll talk about this later, but yeah, the atheists will have the most difficult time defending the assumption that human beings are valuable. All right, maybe it can be done. It's easy for personal theists who believe in Genesis, like Jews, Christians, and Muslims, some Hindus. So, if human beings bear God's image, and Genesis, remember, that's why murder is wrong. It's a form of blasphemy for harming something that bears God's image. So, that's the problem with murder on personal theism. But if there is no God and there is no image of God, then we're left with a question as atheists: how do we value? What kind of rationale can we give to valuing other people? All right. So you guys be the judge. I think Nietzsche's critique is pretty devastating. All right, but think about it. Pleasure. People disagree about pleasure. You can critique utilitarianism on this theory, on this view. We just have different ideas about pleasure. Nietzsche said this, quote, "Man does not strive after happiness. Only the Englishman does that." And that's who he's critiquing there, Bentham and Mill. Wittgenstein said this, quote, "I don't know why we are here, but I'm pretty sure that it is not in order to enjoy ourselves." John Hick said this. This is what he says in response to the problem of evil. We are not pets. We're not God's pets in a terrarium. Experiencing pleasure is not our purpose on this earth. So, this is going to be a mistake of a lot of people. Like, they critique God. Wow, there's just too much evil of a certain amount of. There's just too much evil in the world for there to be a God. There's too much pain and suffering. All right? And John Hicks says, whoa, 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 whoa. You're assuming the point of life is for us to be happy turtles in a terrarium. All right? On the worldview of Christian theism, the summum bonum is the knowledge of God and experiencing God's goodness and holiness, and any extras, having the thrill of being able to work with God to bring the texture of the kingdom of heaven to this earth and to experience that peace that passes all understanding. Those things are the highest goods, not pleasure from eating Kit Kats and Dr. Peppers. All right, publicity objection. You guys can read that. It's pages 125, 126. Basically, morality should be public. Rules should be public, so we can all be ethical people. But wait a minute, we shouldn't trust people with utilitarianism. Either they're going to be too dumb to make the calculations, or what have you. So let's just give people generic deontological rules to follow, and morality in the public would be easier. Pojman gives a response, 130, 131. Namely, it might apply to AU, but not real utilitarianism. And then ranking these rules, but check it out. Alright, there's Rambo. There's a green-skinned baby. We've had a long lecture so far, but let's keep on going. Rule utilitarianism. Alright, here's the difference. Act utilitarianism. McKinnon says, act utilitarianism states that we ought to consider the consequences of each act separately. Rule utilitarianism. Real utilitarianism states that we ought to consider the consequence of the act performed as a general practice. So, does that make any kind of sense? Act utilitarian, you do the consequences for that instance, that act right there. To go back to me and the Kit Kat in front of me and my niece. Do I give the Kit Kat to my niece? Do I fight her for the Kit Kat? What's the best thing to do here? I calculate the consequences for this situation. The real utilitarian is going to say, whoa, 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 this is too difficult. Let's think about all uncles with nieces and whether or not they should share some item, whether food, candy, or just some item. Let's look at all the cases. If all the uncles deprive their niece or nephew of some item, is that going to produce the greatest amount of more pleasure than uncles who give things to their nieces? All right, if you look around the world in all these millions of cases, or billions of cases, it seems like, wow, uncles being generous with a little trifle like a Kit Kat, that's going to produce more happiness in the world than pain. And that's going to produce a lot more pleasure than withholding little gifts from nieces and nephews. All right, does that make sense? Probably not. Let's think about this case. All right, this actually happened to me. Imagine that you're in first grade at Montfort Heights Elementary School in Cincinnati, Ohio. Jenny and Jason share a desk right next to you. Jason brings in a new eraser, a pink pet. It looks so good, it's good enough to eat. This actually happened to me. My mom, I love her to death. She had all these erasers from when she was in school in the 50s, and she didn't buy me any new erasers. She's like, just use these old ones. And I was like, Mom, I would go to the store. We would go to Van Loonen's on the corner of West Fork and Cheviot, or West Fork and North Bend there. And I would say, look at this pink pet. I want a pink pet. Mom would say, no. You have plenty of erasers that are 50 years old in the house. And I was like, always upset. Why can't I get a pink pet? Why can't I get a pink pet? And then my buddy next to me has a pink pet in his desk. I want that pink pet. Do I steal it or do I not? All right? As an act utilitarian, I try to have to calculate how much pleasure and pain in the situation. Let me sum it up. It's moral for me to steal that pink pet on act utilitarianism because the amount of pleasure I will get from that is greater than the pain that Jason will get from losing it. Because his mom is rich and his mom's going to buy him another pink pet or 10 pink pets. His mom doesn't have an issue like my mom does, so I'm never going to get a pink pet from my mom, so I've got to steal this thing. Act utilitarian, the moral thing to do is for me to steal that pink pet. Alright? Now, on rule utilitarianism, I don't just think about the pain and pleasure I have and Jason has right there in the situation. I calculate all the instances of stealing. Alright, for all elementary school kids in the world, now and in the future, if we follow the rule, steal a knick-knack from your neighbor's desk, that's going to produce more pain or pleasure in the world overall. Alright? I think it's obvious that stealing, as a general principle and practice, would produce more pain than pleasure in the world. Even though there might be some isolated cases, like me and the pink pet, where the person stealing would get more pleasure than the person's who's having the thing being stolen from. But overall, stealing will be bad. Does that make sense? Alright. I hope that helps. Act utilitarianism, you calculate that one case right then and there. Me and Jason and that pink pet. Rule utilitarianism, that one case is not special. You think about all the potential cases that are similar and calculate. Alright. The 3 advantages of real utilitarianism. You don't need to calculate as much. So with the pink pet example, I've got to know Jason's financial situation with his mom and all this stuff to know how easily is it for his mom to replace that $1 pink pet. Alright? But I have no idea. It's hard to calculate those things. For the one of a nail. For an act utilitarian, it's very easy to calculate. On rule utilitarian, you just look at all these cases, and people can envision if everybody steals in elementary schools are going to be chaotic, and it's going to be painful. Secondly, it doesn't require too much. Okay? Remember the problem with act utilitarian? The no rest objection. We're not going to be spending money on our own kids. We're not going to be having any luxury items, that type of thing. But on rule utilitarianism, we might find where we can make general rules, where we take care of our own, and that type of thing. Also, it avoids the distribution of happiness objection for some of the same reasons. Spreading out pain, we can make general rules to spread out pain and that type of thing. It's not so narrowly minded and focused on this one incident. Rule utilitarians are thinking about society and the world and what moral rules will maximize pleasure and minimize pain. Alright, talk about these on the advantages on the discussion board if you want. Now, one serious objection remains for the rule utilitarianism. Utilitarian. Unconscionable acts are still on the table. Alright? The end still justifies the means for real utilitarianism, even though you're using this different method to calculate, looking at millions of cases instead of one act. Alright? So, a philosopher named Barcalau came up with this. This is his objection from green-skinned babies. Emmett Barcalau. Suppose that in a society, 1 out of 100,000 babies is born with green skin. Everybody hates green skin infants. All right? Green skin infants hate life because everybody hates them. So, all right? So, because everyone without green skin detests green skin infants, everyone, including the parents of green skin infants, would feel happier if the babies are killed at birth than if they are not killed. If green-skinned infants were allowed to live, they would be shunned by society and they would never live a normal life. They'll be beaten up and tortured and made fun of, have low self-esteem, turn to drugs, and whatnot. All right. So, let us suppose that because of people's intense revulsion to green-skinned people, total well-being in the society would be greater if they followed a rule permitting the killing of green-skinned infants than there would be if they don't. So the well-being of 100,000 people outweighs the well-being of one infant. According to a rule of utilitarianism, kill green-skinned infants is a correct moral rule. All right, does that make sense? So, infanticide of green-skinned babies. That is the most immoral thing to do on rule utilitarianism. Why? Because everybody hates green-skinned babies. Green-skinned babies are abused. They don't enjoy life either. Everybody's happier if you just throw a green-skinned baby to the hippo in the river. All right? Problem is, wait a minute, that seems wrong. It seems like even though people have this problem of people should get over it. So the solution seems to be is getting over people's prejudice towards green-skinned babies, not just obeying however people get pleasure in that culture. All right, does that make sense? All right. If this is not clear, let me know. All right, one of the best act-utilitarians in television or film is Jack Bauer, played by Kiefer Sutherland. There he is with Phoebe right there. All right. So in class, I would have you guys watch a clip of 24. Basically, Jack Bauer, and I don't know how many seasons he was on doing the television show 24. His whole goal was to stop nuclear attacks by terrorists. All right? So, Los Angeles almost got blown up 15 times by a nuke. All right? Jack Bauer did not care about the means. He just cared about the ends. So, on the way to stopping the nuclear bombing of Los Angeles and saving millions of lives, what did he do? He broke every law known to man. He broke international law. He shot his boss in the middle of in the square in one season. He tortured his ex-wife's new boyfriend. He just cut a lamp cord and tortured him, trying to get information out of him. So Jack Bauer was a great act utilitarian. The ends justify the means. He's trying to save our country, and so he tortured and killed as many people as he had to stop millions from dying. All right? Swordfish. If you've guys seen this movie, John Travolta's character, he gave the best statement. It was basically act utilitarianism. So in this movie, Travolta and Halle Berry, they steal $80 million from a bank, and they kill like 50 Americans. But what was the rationale? These guys were patriots. They say, we kill 50 American civilians, but we can go around, and with that $80 million, we can kill all kinds of terrorists around the world. All right? So basically he's saying, we save tens of millions of lives by killing these terrorists, and all we have to do is sacrifice 50 innocent civilians in a bank. All right. I've talked enough. But you're going to work on doing hedonic calculus for your ethical decision. You're going to have to do act utilitarian calculation and a rule utilitarian calculation. All right? So, listen, you want to invent your own rules. Some of you guys get tripped up of looking for rules in society that people believe and follow. Forget those. To test a rule, you have to think of a rule. So with the pink pet example, I'm trying to, okay, what's the general rule here? All right, should an elementary school child steal from another elementary school child an unimportant knick-knack or toy? All right? So you try to generalize the rule. You're not going to find that rule in society written in the Ten Commandments or something like that. All right? So you have to kind of generalize your case and your situation. So that's what I'll be looking for. So some of you guys will become enslaved to trying to establish moral rules in our society, like the Ten Commandments. But forget that. Try to invent your own rule around your own case that you bring up. All right. Does that make sense? We're not going to... If you want to do Spider-Man case for your movie clip, you can, where the Green Goblin holds Mary Jane in one hand and then has a gondola car of 25 students. Choose Spider-Man. Sophie's Choice. This is the most depressing movie ever. She has that horrible choice with the Nazis. The Nazi says, hey, choose. You can either keep your little girl or your little boy. You can't have both. So they can either all die or she can give up one of them. Islamic terrorists on spring break. Let's say all of us go to Syria for spring break this year, and then our tour bus gets hijacked by members of ISIS. The leader says that if Larry here doesn't cut off my head, they're going to cut the heads off of everyone in the group. The act utilitarian, he would cut off my head instantly. All right? My life is not worth the lives of 25 students. All right? The rule utilitarian, he would not calculate that one situation. He would say, okay, wait. What about all similar cases of terrorism where a terrorist wants these demands or he's going to behead somebody? And many governments say, well, we have a rule, we don't negotiate with terrorists. And maybe they have that rule because of rule utilitarianism. There's a general rule: if countries don't give in to terrorist demands, terrorists most likely will stop doing these kind of things. All right? Because they realize, oh, these governments will never give in. All right? So a rule utilitarian would say, no, don't behead me, Larry. And because overall, if everybody gives in to terrorist demands, the world will be a worse place, and the world will be a better place if people don't give in to terrorist demands. All right. So for midterm and final, remember the greatest happiness principle and the principle of utility. Know how to use Bentham's hedonic calculus to figure out what an act utilitarian would do in a case. Know how to use rule utilitarian reasoning in a case. Know the difference between Bentham's pig philosophy, pleasure, pushpin is as good as poetry. Know Mill's disagreement with Bentham that, hey, no, we could rank pleasures. I didn't talk about why he said that. Mill said we can make this judgment ourselves by becoming acquainted with different pleasures. So, I might listen to Justin Bieber all day long, and I might get a certain amount of pleasure from him. But wait a minute. If I'm exposed to the brilliance of Van Halen and the guitar of Eddie Van Halen, wow, this is so much better and more refined and richer than this tripe that the Beeb puts out. And so you might be able to do that. Or like as a kid to an adult. Wow, you know what? As a kid, you love these repetitive slapstick TV shows like Three Stooges, but you grow up and you come to appreciate, wow, the intricacies of an Agatha Christie book, you know, better than a simple slapstick comedy of Three Stooges. Does that make sense? Mill thinks that, yeah, you know what? You grew up drinking Natty Light. I mean, when you turned 21, all you drank was Natty Light. Oh, but wait a minute. You started tasting bourbon, and then, wow, now you love the refined pleasure of bourbon or good wine. You know what I'm saying. McDonald's, filet mignon, eventually you're going to be like, oh, you compare it and you can make that judgment. And so, yes. Also, pleasures where you deny yourself, Mill might say. So, you know the pleasure you get from eating a Big Mac every day and a large Dr. Pepper and a bunch of fries. Okay? I love Big Macs from McDonald's. But guess what? You realize that, you know what, there's better pleasures is being fit and functional, all right, over time, rather than having 900 extra pounds on you. So I know that. I gained 17 pounds over 8 weeks this winter. So I just ate like a champ, like it was my job. And so there you have it. All right, so know at least some of the objections against Utilitarianism. Know the benefits of real utilitarianism over Utilitarianism. Know the green-skinned babies objection. And there you have it. Remember the Stanford online and the internet. IEP and SEP, look those up. There's Rambo. Some online texts. Oh yeah, here they are here. Hey, the greatest drug-free baseball player of all time. Forget Barry Bonds. All right. Yeah, we're going to actually, we'll talk about this all semester if we do just war theory. We have these huge tensions with our own security right now, all right? So, data mining, the NSA, and all this stuff. Guess what? If the U.S. government was involved and had every piece of data that came out of our mouths on phones and text messages and emails, it would be much easier to stop terrorist attacks. So, it's very utilitarian. The ends justify the means. Stopping terrorist attacks, even if it means sacrificing American privacy, that's a very clear example of utilitarian reasoning. Now, the deontologists, libertarians are going to say, whoa, 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 whoa. You know what? We would rather have an occasional terrorist attack to preserve some kind of privacy. So the NSA is not listening to every other conversation on our phone. All right? So, we're going to disagree on this as a society. You be the judge. President Obama, one of the reasons why it's very interesting, he does not torture terrorists for information. He does not use enhanced interrogation techniques. Instead, his preferred method is to bomb them with drones. So kill them without a trial. People are going to disagree about the morality of this. So it's going to be a question. Should we, I saw some guy on the news last week argue, listen, we should open Gitmo, and in fact we should interrogate these terrorists and, that type of thing. But I'm not going to make a judgment what's right or wrong there, but you need to, now you will see and hear utilitarian reasoning from people in Congress and presidents, our world leaders. All right? You're going to hear these tensions. Or should we have these rule-based things, or does the ends justify the means? All right, green-skinned babies. Other versions of utilitarianism. you can read these. I think Pojman mentions them in your text. They might be in another text. I'm not sure. This is me and my grandma a year and a half ago. If you want to buy an Angry Mint t-shirt, let me know. If you have questions, complaints about this presentation, email me. And there you have it. All right, guys, be good. I'll see you on the discussion board. This ends Utilitarianism. My name's Tougher.